welcome to Grognards of Gaming. This is episode 8, and I am Rob the Grognard dog, and with me, as always, is my good friend
Mike.
Mike. You need like a Grognard name. Phil
We'll
used to say
figure one out.
my Grognard dog sounds like a 1980s wrestler, so we got to come up with like a 1980s wrestler. But you knew the you loved the WWF when we were kids, so you would know. Something like Macho Mike Savage or something.
I'll figure it out. I'll give it some thought for the next episode.
Yeah, you gotta have a good character name, which is in keeping with today's topic. So we decided at the end of episode 7 that you and I were going to do a like the High Fidelity movie, a top 5 list of favorite characters, favorite backstories, that sort of thing. So why don't we jump right into that? Our viewers are familiar with this format because I did a lot of these. So,
Yes.
uh, favorite characters, Mike. Do tell us. How do you want to do this? Do you want to you want to popcorn back and forth? You give me your 5, your number 5. I'll give my number 5. You do your number 4, something like that.
That seems to be the way that it works best, having watched the other episodes. So who do you
All
want to
right.
start? Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
Why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. So here's what I'll tell you. I do have five. Three of these you have encountered in one form or another. Two of them you have not.
Okay.
Um, yeah. One is very old. Uh, but I'm going to start with one, and this is maybe a slight departure because it's not a character of mine. It's an NPC that I wrote for a game that you guys played with me. If you remember the Western game we were playing,
Yes.
there was the tavern keeper, Millie Reynolds. Now we've never gone back to the Western game. We may go back to the Western game, so I won't reveal a lot. But she was a tavern keeper, a woman that's a tavern keeper in a Western town. Yeah, kind of trope, a little bit of trope. Running the brothel, running the tavern. But a very deep, very involved character who, as you guys were discovering, had their hands in everything. And it was a lot of fun to write and design for, to be like the central hub, to make the the cliche tavern a little more fun, and rather than just have a tavern keeper, have somebody who's tied into everything that's going on in the local area for the Western. Um, you guys haven't experienced everything with her, but very deep character, probably one of the deepest NPCs I've written in a long time. Um, and I look forward to you getting more experience with her. But you guys, all the stories at some point came back to her some way. She had a tidbit or a piece of gossip, or she was directly involved with one of the characters that the player characters were trying to find out about. But she was a very enjoyable character just to write, both from trope and also expanding her a little bit, giving her a little more power, you know, to help guide story along and things of that nature. So that's my number 5 is that particular NPC that I wrote for you guys for the Western game.
That's great. Yeah, and unfortunately, you can't talk too much about her because that game is still going on, and I'm a player in it, so we can't
Yes,
spoil it.
you're right.
And we're using the excuse
Fate
me,
system
the
for
fate
that.
system in that game.
Yes.
Yeah, and so how do you find how did you find the fate system for for creating this character and her backstory and everything?
Well, I created her just like I would create another PC, like a PC I would want to play, because she's one of those depth named characters who's central to the story. But it gives the fate system gives you a lot of narrative leeway, with the stunts and things like that you can write that give a lot of flavor to the characters. You could almost take some of these fate characters. You could almost use the fate system to create characters that you were going to put in a book, a novel, or a story that you were writing. So I find it very helpful, very creative, to give flavor to characters and to give life to the characters. So I like it a lot.
For sure, for sure. And you and I, one of our fellow players that we've been gaming with since we were tots. I mean, Paul and Phil and I
Yeah.
discussed having Paul on the show that we would interview him. Paul is fantastic when it comes to creating character backstories, and this has really never been more evident to me than when we started using the fate system, because then it really allows him to shine, because um, it's a very narrativist system, and so
Yes.
built into the character sheet is you've got to describe aspects about your character, and they're actually called aspects, and so Paul will take those aspects and he'll really run with it, and he'll make a separate sheet just where he develops each aspect, and writes a little bit of a story, and it's just fantastic, and I would love to have him on to talk about his process in a future episode. But Paul actually is a good segue to my number five, because it's actually a character of Paul's, and
Okay.
so my number five is is using the police system, excuse me, the fate system, and we ran a police story game. So we just call it the police game, and so Paul's character uh, started out as like just a police officer, a police woman, and in like the special victims unit of the police department. So she would handle specific types of crime, where particularly victims of particular crimes and that sort of thing. But then we had been playing this game prior to the whole 2020 riots thing, and then it became like you can't tell police officer stories anymore. They took them off of television. You can't watch cops on TV anymore. You're not allowed to make heroes into you're not allowed to make police officers into heroes anymore. And so it was actually I actually found that a stumbling block to coming up with stories, because the story was set in the modern day, and I wanted to reflect the difficulties that police officers are having, sort of being defunded socially, if not financially defunded socially. And it was a stumbling block to me. And I even said to Paul, I'm going to tell you, I'm having a hard time coming up with stories to tell anymore, because it's just everything's so controversial, and I want to reflect that. But it just makes it difficult to tell. And Paul came up with a great idea. He said, "Well, how about this? How about if my character leaves the police force and she becomes a private eye, and we turn it into a private eye game?" And I was like, "That's a great idea." And so we did that. And so the character, who had been an NYPD Special Victims Unit officer, is now like in Connecticut, running her own private eye organization. So like a la Remington Steele, a la Moonlighting. And so now I
Awesome.
can draw on those things. There's no stumbling block. We're having a lot of fun with it. The character transition was smooth from one to the other, built it into the story. It's really fantastic. And the fun part is Paul doesn't know this, although I think I mentioned this in another episode with Phil. And so if Paul saw that episode, the secret's out of the bag. But one thing I do for the new detective game now, the private eye game, is I will go back and watch old episodes of Moonlighting or Remington Steele or Heart to Heart, and I just say, what if that client came, instead of going to Remington Steele, instead of going to Dave and Maddie, instead of going to Heart, if they went to Paul, how would that play out? And I mean, that's just been working out really well. We've been having a blast with it. So number one, kudos to Paul for the way he comes up with his favorite characters, because um, this character, even when she was a policewoman, had a circle of friends. She had like a bar that she went to, and Paul came up with ideas for all the people in the bar, the bartender, this and that. He came up with people in the medical examiner's office that his character deals with, people in the district attorney's office that his character deals with, and just brought these NPCs to life. And it's amazing how he does that very succinctly, and it just fed me all the information I needed to run a game. I would just be like, I like this bartender character. How can I build an episode around the bartender, the bar that his character goes to when she's off duty? And I would do that, and it was a lot of fun. So number one, kudos to Paul for that. Number two, kudos for Paul for coming up with the solution of transitioning from the policewoman to the private eye. And yeah, it just that's my top five. That's my number five. I think that really worked well, and I have a lot of fun with it still. And we're still playing it as a private eye game.
Yeah. And it's funny. You see, I went the NPC for number five, but number four of mine is also Paul Kelly.
Ah, Paul made it on both of our lists. All right, lay it on me. What's your number?
My number four, also Fate System, something you run. I love his Musketeer character
Yes.
from our Musketeer. His Musketeer character is amazing. And just, you know, it's not just the backstory, but also the way he plays the character. He just nails that character. And I guess it's not giving anything away. They end up as brother-in-laws. My character and his character end up as brother-in-laws, and the whole story going through that and how that all happened. Part you're doing, but a lot of his acting was just amazing in that whole series. And I love how he plays that character. So it's the number four character is his musketeer character from our musketeer fate story.
That's funny because I made a top five list, and his musketeer character was my number six, so I didn't get to talk. We're just doing five. But tell me, since I'm not going to talk about it, because what is it about Sebastian Seba
Seba.
Seba Sevigny de Rouen? What is it about Sebastian that you really like about it? What is it that he plays about that character that you really like?
And Paul would probably hate me for saying this, and if he's watching, he might hate me for saying this. It's almost so if you take the classic Three Musketeers and D'Artagnan, it's almost like he took both good and bad pieces from each one of them and put them together in Sabah. And
Yeah.
the way he mixed and matched, you know, some of their positives and some of their flaws together into Sabah and can just sit out and play it. It's just to me amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
having read the classic, you know,
Yeah,
it,
I've got it on the bookshelf behind me. Yeah, I don't think that would be any reason for Paul to get upset with you, because it really is a testament to how well he could deconstruct the genre and reconstruct it into a role playing character that embodies the genre. And so yeah, yeah, once again, kudos to Paul. Yeah, fantastic. I love that. I love that he made both of our lists.
that
All right, so mine. Oh, your number. That was your
was
number
my
four.
number four. So you're
All right,
number
so
four.
my number four is your character in the Star Trek Fate game that I run, where you play a temporal agent. I love. Okay, so part of this is I'm a big fan of time travel stories, but the other part is, I was this started as a one-on-one game between Paul and me. So you were not in it when we started it. Paul is and Paul are and Jonathan are the biggest Star Trek fans I know in my gaming circles. And so I was running, and I'm out of my league, like when I run, because you guys know way more about Star Trek than I do. But I do my research, and I'm able to hold my own. And so Paul wanted to play the captain of the starship. And all right, that's a little hard to do because all the action, the captain's not going to get involved in all of the action. But and there's the Captain Kirk model where he does go down with the teams, and he gets directly involved. So we've decided to borrow from that. So we do put Paul's captain character in the center of the action as much as we possibly can. But then then I thought, well, Mike loves Star Trek, and when your schedule opened up a little bit, we invited you, and I thought to myself, what are we, how are we going to do this? Where Mike is either going to have to agree to play a character who is subservient to Paul's character, and of course we're mature enough role players that I'm sure you could have handled that with no problem. Um, but that wasn't my preference, and so then I think I had suggested a few ideas to you, and you went with the temporal agent idea, and
Yes.
I love that because your temporal agent is his subservience to the captain is a ruse, because he actually serves. I'm not a ruse, because he is. They all are Starfleet, right?
Right.
And so he does respect Paul's character's authority, but your character answers to a higher
A
authority
higher.
in the temporal agency, and
Yes.
so I love that. So you guys are on equal footing. And I love how you play the temporal agent. I mean, I knew you were gonna do well with that character because you know more about Star Trek than I do. And so yeah, you play it to the hilt. And there what we started when we started, we kept the fact that your character was a temporal agent from Paul, but
Yeah.
we only kept it from him for like a session or two, and we were dropping clues, and then eventually he the player figured it out, but his character has not yet figured it out. So now Paul is in the situation where he's got to separate player knowledge from character knowledge. And again, as a Grognard, as a veteran role player, he has no well, he has no trouble doing that. But he did admit to me in fact in our last role playing session where I was running a one-on-one Star Wars game for him, and he plays a Jedi Knight in the wake of the Battle of Naboo. You are also in that game, and Jonathan is in that game. But sometimes when Paul and I have some free time, I'll just run one on one for him. I'll do a little side story when you guys aren't available. And he has fallen in with Count Dooku just in the wake of the Battle of Naboo. And Paul was, Paul was role playing. He's a good role player, but he was role playing his character a little too suspicious of Senator Palpatine and a little too suspicious of Count Dooku. And I kept having to call him when I was like, why is it your character is suspicious of Palpatine? And he's like, he really couldn't give an answer. And he knew the answer because he himself knew that Palpatine is Sidious, but his character doesn't know it. And but when the same thing happened with Count Dooku, I did kind of one way anticipating that he might have this trouble with this with Dooku was the way I got around it was um, it's not actually clear at this point in the timeline, even to the most studied Star Wars scholar, when Count Dooku fell to the dark side. So it is quite possible that in the immediate wake of the Phantom Menace, of the Battle of Naboo, that Dooku may yet not have joined forces with Sidious. May still be the idealistic, Jedi who left the Order. And so I kind of hinted that towards Paul, and he was able to process that. That made it a little easier for him. So sometimes it's hard, even for a veteran role player, and that may be a topic for another episode. But when it comes to the temporal agent in the Star Trek game, he has no trouble. He's able to
He's a,
very
yeah.
like buy into that. His captain has to sort of accept that
Al-
you're.
Although we do have fun with explanations for some things that my character does. Yeah. Oh, why does he do this? The captain asks, "Why did you do this?" And I have to come up with something creative to keep away from the whole temporal agent thing. So we have a little bit.
Yeah, that's fun, and I think Paul like he has a little bit of fun using his out of character knowledge to sort of poke you, like, all right, come up
Yeah.
with it. Yeah, my captain, he's wondering about this. Well, how do you explain it? And we have fun with it. That's true. So yeah, so your temporal agent is number 4 on my list. I love that character.
That's awesome. Okay. So we're at 3, right? We're number 3.
Yeah.
So this is something you kind of introduced me to many, many moons ago. Mushing, multi-user shared hallucination. For those who are not familiar, because it's dying out of fashion, it's a text-based internet group role-playing experience. Um, but this is a character that a friend of mine made. Um, that and we're still friends to this day, even though we don't play the characters. Called the character Frog. It was an orphaned musician that was trying to hide the fact that they were orphaned, and it was a long term student teacher relationship. I was playing a World of Darkness mage, and they ended up as a student of mine. Um, and it was a long term relationship. But basically, they were originally trying to pretend they were not alone, and just how challenging it is in the text-based medium where you don't see faces, you don't see expressions. They did such a wonderful job of conveying emotion just through text with this character and descriptions, including sound, smell, feel, the whole thing in a text-based medium. Very good writer was the player of this character. But the depth of the character and the time taken and everything, we end up playing together for better than 5 years with the two characters, on a almost a daily basis, logging in and playing for a couple hours here and there on the mic. But the reason I liked it was a very well written character. It was something. One of the things that, and you may know this, sometimes it's hard to sustain a character over a long time. With the growth, with the changes, are they still playable? Are they still enjoyable to play? And this person not only made this character enjoyable to play for them, but enjoyable for other people to play with, which kind of calls back to the old toxicity thing. It never got to that point, and that's why I enjoyed this character. And that's third on my list, which is one of the ones that you have not come across yet. So
Fantastic. Okay. All right. Yeah, I like how our lists are going in similar directions. So my number three is also from a gaming group that you weren't a part of, and it's when I moved to New York City and I got involved with friends there. I met friends there who were gamers. Excuse me. And so one of them I've spoken about a lot on the Grognards of Gaming podcast is my friend Jason, and so Jason is from Malaysia, and I mean he's actually born in Malaysia and he grew up in Malaysia and he came to the United States when he was a young man, like in his 20s, to work on Wall Street. And so all of the gamers that I've ever gamed with really have been Westerners. You know, we've all been Westerners, and so we've all grown up in with Western style storytelling, and we've got these Western sensibilities. And Jason has that too. I mean, he can do that with great facility. But Jason also has, having grown up in Malaysia, he also fully understands the Eastern style of storytelling, which is different from the Western
yes,
style of storytelling. And for example, one difference he pointed out to us is that Western stories tend to end upbeat on an upbeat, whereas Eastern stories don't necessarily, and they often end on a really downbeat. And you could see why, like Japan was wiped out in World War II by nuclear weapons, and so their stories will often reflect that wound, and they'll end on a sad note, something like that. So one game that was a flagship game for our New York group was a 1930s two-fisted hero, everyman hero pulp game,
okay,
and
yeah,
we all played the typical Western tropes. I played the great white hunter with the mustache and the big gun. I say, oh chap, with the monocle. And then I had then my friend Michelle. She played like a nightclub singer in Egypt who had big powers, and then Jonathan, he played like a stunt pilot, two-fisted stunt pilot. He had an airplane that was our conveyance to get us from one adventure to the other, and so forth. So Jason brought the Eastern sensibility to that game, and it worked really well. So he played basically the killer. Sammy Mack is a famous actor in Hong Kong cinema, and one of his most popular characters that he played was this assassin, just known as the Killer, kind of like the man with no name, the Killer. If you're a fan of the television show Community, they the Asian character on that show, he does in one episode. He comes in dressed as the killer. It might have been a Halloween episode, or might have been one of their many paintball episodes where they're playing paintball on campus. Very very funny show. If you haven't watched Community, you would love it. I think any gamer would love it, particularly because Dan Harmon, who wrote the show, is a gamer, and then he did when that show was over. He just got like a bunch of actor friends together, and they would play Dungeons and Dragons around the table, and they would film it, and they put that up. I can't think of the name of that, but I'll superimpose it here on the screen when I in a post production. But anyway, so Jason played a character that was just very closely based on Sammy Mack, the killer Sammy Mack, and actually, Sammy. Now I'm confused. If Sammy Mack was the actor's name, or was Sammy Mack the character name that he used in the Pulp game? Anyway, once again, I'll clear that up in post production. But anyway, the killer, and one of the reasons why the killer, that Jason, the killer character, is a favorite of mine, is not only because it introduced these new elements from Eastern storytelling into our game that were new and fresh to me, but also the the very so this was a flagship game. We ran it for a year. We played every Monday night after work. We would gather at Jason's apartment in Queens, and we would sit around the table and we would play this game. And we ran 50 episodes for a year. And finally, we decided as we were like in the 40s, in the episode 43, 44, we were like, we really should end the pulp game and like make something else our flagship game. And what we should do is we should end it at like a nice even number, episode 50. And another cool thing we might do is instead of playing on a Monday night, let's pick a Sunday when we all have all day, and we'll all gather and we'll do a round robin GMing. We'll do a gaming marathon. Whoever is we used to round robin GM. It was mostly Jonathan and I who would alternate GM, but every once in a while one of the other players would try their hand at it. So this time we decided let's pick the three of us and we'll do a round robin GMing, and we'll each run episode 47, episode 48, 49, and 50, and we'll wrap it up one Sunday, and it'll be great. And so it's episode 50. We've been playing all day on Sunday. It's episode 50. Our characters are in a warehouse, and we're facing down an adversary that we, for a change, we're outgunned. Like we can't handle the adversary, and we're not quite sure how to do it. So in true to the original Hong Kong cinema character that Jason's character was based on, Jason's character says to the rest of us, "Get out of here! Like retreat! Like get out of here!" And we're like, "Get out of here! Like this is a pulp game! Like we're pulp characters. We're two fisted heroes. Two fisted heroes don't retreat." And Jason was like, Jason, like says this out of character. No, trust me. And of course, we all trusted each other very well. So we were all right. We were all like, all right, let's see where Jason's going to go with this. So we retreat, we pull back, our character retreat. We leave Jason's character alone in the warehouse with all of the adversaries. And I'll never forget this. It was so dramatic. Um, there, he had his machine gun, and he shoots like a drum of oil, and he just takes a cigarette and he just throws it into the oil, and he sacrifices himself. It was the last session, so why not? He takes his own character out to take out all of the bad guys at once. It was so great. We were just like, we were out of our minds. We were like cheering. It was perfect. We didn't know where he was going with this. We gave him the leeway to do what he was going to do, and he did it, and it was awesome. And it was a fitting end to his character. It was a fitting end to the pulp, to the story, and it was a perfect homage to the original Kong action character that Jason had based his character on. So I'll never forget that. Jason, bravo to you for that. That was marvelous, unforgettable moment. That's my number.
Okay. Okay. Uh, so number two. Uh, number two is a character that I played in a system called Rollmaster. Um, for anybody who has ever played it, it is a very complicated, very convoluted system. They've got tables for everything, and character creation takes like a day. It's um, and it's all it's I made at the time. We had a lot of mages and sages and all these other people. I made a barbarian. Um, and I played the barbarian to the teeth, sometimes to the chagrin of my fellow players. I will give you an example. Okay. I will give you my two favorite moments with the character just to give you an idea of where I went. And one of them is kind of out of character, not out of character, but is out of character. I'll explain. They went to a dwarven city, and my barbarian character was the only one without a real quality weapon. And he knew from being told and from experience that dwarves made great weapons. So he's going through this entire city trying to find a good dwarven weapon. Okay. And finally runs into a guy and says, listen, here's what you got to do. He's like, we dwarves are tough, so you got to prove that you're tough. He gave me directions and a map. Okay. Now, mind you, my character's not the brightest character, and I play him like this.
Right.
Gave me a map. He said, you go to this door, you knock on this door. When the dwarf answers the door, you punch him in the face, and that's the passcode, and he will let you in by weapon. Wait, it gets better. He follows the instructions to the T. The door opens, he punches the guy in the face. The GM makes me roll for punching him in the face. And there's a critical table. Okay. There's a critical call to 66, which is like auto death. If you roll a 66 on a 100-sided die, it's like auto death. I rolled a 66. The door he sent me to was the door to the palace guard. I killed a
Oh,
palace guard.
oh no.
So the rest of the session was spent for the rest of the party trying to get me out of that trouble. So that's one. The other side, like I said, very convoluted, roll for everything type of system. For whatever reason, this character ended up as an alchemical savant. Never told anybody this. So we're in a wizard's laboratory, and one of the familiars knocks over a vial of acid. And I make the roll and I go, oh, all you got to do is take this base and do this with it. All the wizards just stopped and are like, kind of broke the wizards that I did. And that's playing a character like that with those little surprises. That's why that's my number two.
Yeah, that's fun, and you have to be careful not to overdo it with characters like that because it can sometimes get on the nerves of the other players. But
It
you
does.
know, yeah,
You got
but
to have
you know,
good balance, you know.
yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. Playing the intelligence of the character and the gullibility of the character got me in trouble a couple times. You just don't overdo it. But it was a lot of it was. Me. That was a stretch for me to play for playing all that gullibility. Like, but it was very enjoyable. So that's my number two.
There you go. So sometimes breaking type, that might be the moral to take from the story. Sometimes breaking type from the character you usually play becomes one of your most memorable characters. All right, so my number two, I'm not going to talk about it too much because I've spent a lot of time on Grognards of Gaming talking about the Doctor from a Traveler game that my friend John ran, different from Jonathan, who I was just talking about. So it the last episode that I did with Phil, episode 6, which would be 2 episodes prior to this one.
Yeah.
I talk about that Traveler game in great detail. In fact, we were having some video difficulties, some technical difficulties, and so because my image had gotten so pixelated, I thought it might be more aesthetically pleasing to superimpose pictures of actors over the screen representing me and Michelle, and as I told the story of the Traveler game. But it bears, I could summarize it in very, very quickly. Basically, I was new to Traveler. I was not new to science fiction games, but I was new to Traveler. I didn't really know what kind of character I wanted to play because I didn't know the setting very well, because every science fiction game has its own unique setting. So I decided to create a throwaway character, the Doctor, who was going to be like a double agent. He was going to be on the ship, but he was actually going to be the villain. And I didn't tell the other players about this, but I did conspire with the GM to do this. And I thought it would be a good throwaway character. I could betray them mid session one. I could betray them. They would kill my character, and then I would roll up something else. But it turned out, and I don't know anybody who's played Traveler will know this. You roll on a lot of tables to create your character, and I was sitting there with the GM, and I was just having like the dice rolls of my life. I created this amazing character, which in one respect was good because that meant he could stand up against an entire party and hold his own and actually be a fitting big bad evil guy for the climactic scene. But the downside of that was I really loved the character. He was so awesome. And almost didn't want to give him up, but I did give him up in the end. Um, and again, I think the surprise of betraying the characters, just adding that sort of new element to spice up the game, I thought that would be kind of cool, and it was really cool for everybody but Michelle. Michelle did not like it. She did play along, to her credit, and she gave me the leeway because she trusted me as a player. But I did betray that trust in betraying her, and you can learn more about that. That's the focus of episode 6. At the end of episode 6, I tell that story, so I won't go into that again. But I thought that was a whole lot of fun, and the Doctor was great fun. I sort of pictured him as like uh, I guess a tough guy version of Robert Picardo. His head was all shaved, and he had his little round spectacles, and he was real severe, and he did his job on the ship. But his severity came not from the fact that he was a dedicated doctor, but the fact that he was like the villain. He was like, he was gearing up to really betray the crew, and that was just so. Um, what's that?
Lost in Space, Dr. Smith.
Dr. Smith. That's exactly right. And I think Dr. Smith from Lost in Space is where I got the idea to do this. Except that I wanted to make him like not a bumbling villain, not like a Keystone Cop villain, but like a real threat. And it was a lot of fun to do that. It was almost what made that character fun is that I was almost secondary GM in that game. I was player only as a costume. I was really secondary GM. I love to GM, so that might be why I like that so much. All right, Mike, that brings us to our number one. Dying to hear your number one. Who was your number one favorite character or backstory?
You're going to love this. And this is, I told you one was really, really old. Back when we started playing in D&D, mages and fighters and thieves were all really the big focus for everybody to play, for one reason or another. Okay. You, however, played our first cleric, Alcaris.
I did. Oh no. Yes, I did. Alcaris is your number one?
Alcaris is my number one because, again, we talk about breaking type.
Yeah.
We were pulling characters from fiction, from the Shannara series, from Lord of the Rings, from the Pride. I pulled from Pride, Terran Wanderer. And we were pulling all characters. Not only was it among our first set of original characters, but it was a class that nobody had played, and you went in 100%.
I know.
And I was thinking about this because of how hard, and we've had this problem recently with our game, how hard clerics are to find and get people to play. And you just threw yourself 100% into playing a cleric from level one. We were back in doing level one back then.
Yeah.
Just took that character and grew that character all the way through the top levels. I love the character. I loved how you played the character. And I always think about that. When I think about clerics today, I'm like, I think about Alcaris.
Oh my
So,
God.
so that
I
is my.
I am so flattered. I'm very honored that Alcaris, yeah, Alcaris has a has a place in my heart too because yeah, we did as you said we started at first level and we went up I think to the master levels, didn't we? Or yeah. I
We
don't know,
did.
we went 20, but we went up there. Wow, that is really flattering. I'm very honored. I'm very honored. Wow. All right. Well, gee, now I feel bad. I feel like my number one should be one of yours, but my number one is a character or actually a series of characters that Michelle played. So Michelle, just what a brilliant lady and just a fantastic role player and fantastic GM, and she's just the greatest. And I learned so much from Michelle. What and so I don't know that this is a flaw, but we all have quirks when it comes to our role playing styles and stuff. And Michelle has a quirk where she's got she's got a particular type of character that she likes to play, and you can see no matter what the setting, whether we're playing the pulp setting, or whether we're playing a science fiction setting, or whether we're playing fantasy setting, you will see this type of player. It's not every character she plays, but you will see this type crop up somewhere, and the type is this. Um, the character is the character is female. She's on the verge of womanhood. So she's like 14 years old. She's on that line between child and adult. She's got a special power, and that's the character. And so in the Pulp game, I said that was our flagship game, and I said that Michelle played a nightclub singer with psychic powers. But the Pulp game had spin-offs, and so one of the spin-offs from the Pulp game was the kids Pulp game. And so we all created kid characters set in the 1930s. They were in the same universe and they would cross paths with the adult characters, but they had their own adventures. And so this was Michelle played a character in that game of this template. And there are other examples I could come up with. When I was running, so one of the games that became a flagship game post that Pulp game was when Wizards of the Coast came out with the Star Wars Saga edition, and I am probably the biggest Star Wars fan my
As
gaming
much
friend.
a Star Trek fan as I am, you are a Star Wars fan. Agreed.
I
Agreed.
love Star Trek, but Star Wars, yeah, is my wheelhouse. And so I said when Saga Edition came out, I bought the books. I loved the system. I'm not a huge fan of the D20 system, but I thought that this was a really eloquent, elegant version of D20. And so I said, I want to run a Star Wars campaign using the Saga Edition, and this will be our flagship game. So so we all came up with characters, and Michelle came up with, everybody wanted to play Jedi because we at the time that this was happening, it was when Phantom Menace had come out, and so we were all jazzed to like play in the prequel era. We wanted to sandbox in the prequel era, so and so I said, all right, I'll run it. I'll run it right after. I forget if I started with the just before the Battle of Naboo or after the Battle of Naboo. I think it was probably after the Battle of Naboo. Anyway, everybody wanted to play Jedi because it was the height of the Jedi era, but Michelle wanted to play a noble, and so she played a noble, and we had a lot of fun with that. But then we decided to do spin-off characters. We decided to do tell other stories in the same timeline who would cross paths with our main characters. And so now Michelle, after seeing the other players play Jedi, now she decided she wanted to play a Jedi. She wanted to give her hand at it. And so again, we had young characters. They were Padawans. We did a young, like a kid version of that game. Not a kid version, but a younger version of that game. And so she decided to take her usual template and make that her Padawan. So once again, this was a female character who was about 14 years old on the verge of adulthood, and she was a Jedi. That was her special power. And her name was Ishmael. And Michelle had so much fun playing with Ishmael that there was a time when I was running for different subsets of friends in this same universe. It was like a group of friends that didn't always play with our group, but sometimes they could. And so I would run for that. And so they had a starship, and they played the crew of a starship. And if Michelle was going to be in that game, who would she play? And then sometimes it was just Michelle and me because uh, Jason had gone off to India for work for a while, and I was just running for Michelle, and so who was she going to play? So I came up with this idea that uh, Ismail, her favorite Jedi character, uh, her Jedi character based on her favorite template, I should say, was going to be kidnapped, not kidnapped, but found by the Kaminoans, and a rogue Kaminoan going to clone Ishmael a number of times. And and so there were it started off with just one Ishmael clone. And so I started off the adventure. Michelle wasn't even sure who she was going to play. I'm like, just don't worry about it. Just come to the game. She's like, well, who am I playing? Am I my noble? Am I playing Ishmael? I'm like, don't worry about it. Just come to the game. And so, so I said, bring all of your Star Wars characters. Don't worry about it. Just come to the game. So we meet, and opening scene was darkness, and then you start to see light. You start to light and shape, and things are coming into focus, and you see bright lights above you, and what do? And she's like, I don't know. I don't even know who I am. I sit up. I look at myself. I say, all right, you sit up, and you're to describe Ishmael. You're a young woman. You're wearing like a hospital, and you're in this room, and you're alone. But the thing was, Ishmael was a Miri Allen, and if you know the Star Wars universe, Miri Allens in the prequel trilogy, Miri Allens, there were two Miri Allens. They were played by two actresses of color. So one I think was an African actress, and one was an Indian actress. And they had facial tattoos. That was
Yes.
their okay. So like in the Star Wars universe, Miri Allens tend to have darker skin tones, and culturally they tattoo their faces. So I started describing Ishmael, and she started to realize, oh, I'm playing Ishmael. But I said, but you notice you don't have any tattoos. You don't. Your bone structure is slightly smaller, like when Ishmael first was 14. Um, and then she started. She was like, wait a minute, what? And then she slowly started to piece together that she was in a Kaminoan cloning facility, and that's
Totally.
when Mel realized oh, I'm playing a clone of Ishmael. So she got to play Ishmael, but it was a blank slate for Ishmael. She didn't
Do
have
what?
to go to the Jedi temple and be a Jedi. She could do it. She was a force sensitive clone of a Jedi. She could do whatever she wanted. And Michelle had so much fun with this that I decided to do it not one more time, not two more times, but three more times. Actually, I think four more times. So there was Ishmael Prime. No, it was three more times. There was Ishmael Prime, who was the real Ishmael, and then there was Clone Two, Clone Three, Clone Four, Clone Five. So it was Ishmael Two, Subscript Two, Ishmael Subscript Three, Ishmael Subscript Four, and Ishmael Subscript Five. And just each one had her own life, had her own circle of NPCs, had gone her own path, and Michelle absolutely loved it, and I absolutely loved it. And so the Ishmael clones collectively are my number one. That was my favorite.
That is cool. And you've just given me an idea for a campaign, but we'll talk about that later.
Excellent, and maybe we can talk about that in a future episode. So speaking of future episodes, I think that nicely wraps up our top fives for favorite characters and backstory. Is there a particular topic that you think might be fun to talk about in our next episode?
Hmm.
You had mentioned campaigns versus one shots. Would you like to make that?
that we can do that the next time. Campaigns versus one shots would be a good one.
All right, since I gave you an idea for a campaign, let's talk about campaigns versus one shots in our next in our next episode, which will be episode 9 of Grognards of Gaming. So I look forward to seeing you in episode 9. I hope everybody enjoyed episode 8, top 5 favorite characters and backstories. And thanks, Mike. I hope our audience is enjoying these.
So do I. See you next time.
All right, see you next time, pal.
All right. Bye.
All right, bye bye.